the ultimate questions. They landed. And we'll just see how far we can get with them. There are many. But certain questions which relate to daily life, practice in daily life, we're going to leave till tomorrow. But there's enough for another course and another day. So Reni will read the questions, and I don't know if I can answer. I have no idea. And if not, then Reni will help me.
We were laughing earlier because we remembered a sentence from San Francisco who said, "When I'm asked, I don't know. When I'm not asked, I know." This question is, can you clarify or demonstrate the difference between consciousness, awareness?
I told you there were cosmic questions. It's really interesting that the way language in a way helps everybody and confuses everybody at the same time, because consciousness and awareness are used so interchangeably by different people for different purposes, with a whole lot of holiness around it and attachments. But I would say common use is consciousness is being conscious of. It is, in the way it's commonly used and in the way we can look at it and how it might help us, consciousness is consciousness of. There is always an object. Just like I was saying before, in the image in the suttas where two sheaves of wheat are leaning against each other. One is consciousness and one is mind-body, senses, the world. When one falls, the other falls. So consciousness is always connected to an object and arises together with an object. As soon as we see the object, consciousness of it arises, and we have a process of knowing. This can be quite subtle. Sometimes consciousness can be of presence, of something delicate in us that's not a specific object like this. States of mind, states of heart, states of awareness. Awareness is used as something much more basic. If you now ask yourselves, do I exist? Well, everyone would say, sure. At least I think so. I'm here. How do you know? That's awareness. Awareness is something usually more deep. It's just a capacity of knowing, the potential of knowing that's with us all the time, even when we're asleep. And awareness then extends beyond object. It's sometimes used at all levels of the spiritual journey as the ultimate, ha-mukhlat, the source. It's used in this way. I'm not going to start talking about it in that way. I think enough to say awareness would be something that allows consciousness to be there and allows our life force to act, and it's kind of behind the fact that we are alive and knowing. Very, very basic knowing. And that's universal. It's beyond the self. So that's the way I would look at it, but there's a huge debate and discussion in the spiritual, scientific, intellectual, philosophical world about this.
Taking into account the emptiness of the self, can you refer, or is there a reference in Buddhism about the significance of an individual's specific human life? And what should I do to find it?
Beautiful question. Really, really beautiful question. And I think, like Jesus said when he saw the coin of Caesar, we need to give to Caesar what is Caesar's. That's what Jesus said about the coin. We need to give the self its respect, its function in life. It is the kind of basic driving force of our life, and we need to respect it, to hold it as precious, to live a life in which the self manifests in the world in the most harmonious, the most beautiful, the most helpful, the most ethical way. So, from the point of view of self, we need to give the self all the responsibility and care that we can, and not have a view of non-self, because the view of non-self will undo our responsibility in life. There's no need to have a view of non-self. We just have the experience of being in the world with less and less taking the self so seriously. But from the point of view of an individual, of a self, we have a really important duty in life. And that point of view is with us. We can't deny it, and we can't wipe it out because of a Buddhist theory called non-self. So we really don't need theory about this. But as the self, as we live it, becomes less and less dominant in our daily life, in our life, so the boundary of our responsibility gets bigger and bigger. So we become more connected to a wider circle of existence. But this is not to deny the self, it's just to broaden the boundary, to widen the circle of our actions, our thoughts, our love, our connection. It gets wider and wider, and like I said, to the flower on the side of the road that most people wouldn't notice existing. A little tiny flower in Rehov Dizengoff. That's life too. So if we get out of the self-closing movement of self, then our responsibility gets greater, our meaning becomes bigger, and our ethics becomes bigger, and we become in a way more bodhisattva style in our life rather than locked in the self. But it can't be done artificially because of a concept called non-self. So in the bottom line, when we're looking at the world from a self, we need to take that totally seriously as a self and be the best self we possibly can. When we're looking from the point of view of more ultimate, beyond the self, we need to be the best beyond self that we can possibly can.
There is one. Can you talk about why the beauty of the other catches us so much? Is it relative, ultimate, personal?
Do you want to relate? I've been so in a way enchanted by Reni's metaphors, images and poems. And when you talk about the beauty of the other, I really feel it. You have so much to give. The beauty of the other, in a way, is only available to us when we're less busy with ourselves. The more we're, Krishnamurti once said, beauty is when the self is not. We only really can appreciate beauty deeply when we're less busy closing ourselves in our interests. And then slowly we can open to the beauty of the other. And the beauty of the other needs us to notice it, needs us to be aware of it. It needs us to allow it. And think of the beauty of each one of you here in this room. Utter beauty. Each one of you has a shine in your soul. And who is there to see it? We are there to see it if we open our eyes. And we open our eyes by being less closed in our own interests and needs and what we want now and what we don't want. And so I'm not sure that I can say whether it's personal or impersonal. It's just that process. I guess it's not personal really. The more that we are the more we are not wrapped in personal interests, the more the beauty can touch us. We give space to it. So in a way, it's reducing the whole personal issue. When we get attached to beauty and we want it and we want to hold on to it, then it becomes a problem. And then the personal comes in and in a way disturbs it with self-interest. Like my partner is fine when my partner is 20, but what about when my partner is 50 or 60? Or my belongings or my world or my house or my garden or as soon as we start bringing self-interest and possession into the beauty, then when things change we will lose it. So the personal, in that sense, according to the question asked how personal it is, in that sense the personal can disturb it. Yeah. But maybe you want to add something?
Well, Dharma is inquiring into what is beauty. And I can say that for me, beauty is a happening that touches, and it has to do with truth of something that I cannot always express. And I'm reminded of Keats' poem that says, truth is beauty, beauty is truth, that all there is to know in the world and all you need to know. Because beauty is not referred to just as form. There is something that happens that moves us as beautiful. And we can't always pin it down, but somehow it has to do with authenticity and something that touches us. and affects our heart in a way that we call it beauty. Some questions are really worth reading because they have also, but we won't read all of it, so I just choose a fragment. We talk about when we experience boundless, limitless love to all. I wonder, in such a state, what makes special the relationship with our close ones, dear ones, a relationship with a son, with a mother, with a friend, with a child, romantic relationships.
What's special is that they get under our skin. It's really interesting that we develop relationships and we're not really clear how this happens. Love is boundless. Of course it's boundless. Love is our total connection with everything and everyone. It's the way the heart is moved constantly, every day, by what touches us, by what lifts us up, by what annoys us. Also the heart is there. And it so happens that we have people close to us who kind of get under our guard, and they become the address for our love. And this grows and grows and grows, and in a very natural way, the person close to us is collecting our love to them, and we are collecting their love to us. So what happens is a kind of a small circle is created where the same love that is potentially boundless is kind of collected into a small vessel called me and my son, my mother, and so on. And this is natural. This is bonding. Like I was telling stories about my chickens today in the group, and I won't go into the full story. But it so happened through some events that sometimes one or two chickens bonded to me and have followed me everywhere. And this is something really beautiful. I mean, it's bonding, but you can feel that there is, the bonding happens between people and collects the love around it. The same love that could be endless is collected, is in a way, by agreement between two people, held in the space between two people. Same love. We often don't have the capacity to extend that love out. We just don't have that power to do that. And we become dependent on the people close to us. And we need, because we need the love, we need to feel the love, we become even more dependent. And then when someone close to us, for example, a son goes off and does something we don't like, or a daughter, or a mother, or a father, we feel betrayed. And we feel disappointed. Because the love, in a way, is mixed with attachment. And when the love has a very close address, the love is really close, has a close address, the love tends to be contaminated with attachment. Because we want things from the other person. The love keeps going to the other person. And we don't feel that expanded love where everything is the address. So we have to just see that, see the natural love flowing out to the other person, which is very pure, and we all have it, and see the way that we put conditions. It becomes conditional as we express our needs and our limited consciousness or awareness. We have needs, we have desires, we have protection, we want to label the other person, we want to predict what the other person will do, we want to control the other person, and all these things kind of contract the love and contaminate it. But it's still in its nature the same love, totally pure, totally big. It cannot be boxed in. It's boxed in by conditioning, but by itself it cannot be boxed in. It cannot be closed. So we're in that sort of dance. And we just have to be very aware. What I feel in close relationships, if we can really go all the time, touch that unlimited place between us and the close person. And it may not be easy, but when we look in the eyes of a child, for example, that argues with the parent, but if we look in the eyes of that person and see the reality of that child, I mean, most parenting, successful parenting, you can throw away all the books and throw away all the advice and throw away all the concepts about how to be a good parent or a good lover or a good child, and just do one thing. Really see and make the other person, help the other person to know that they are seen by you, fully seen. And that's the basis. If a child feels really seen by their parents and looked behind the eyes, that relationship will be fine. And the child will grow up healthy and well looked after. It's that process that cutting out the kind of distance of conditioning, needs, fears, insecurity, of change, or of basically needs. It's, do you want to add something? Yeah.
It's a big subject.
It's a big subject, yeah, but maybe you can add a few words.
I think it's important not to confuse, not to restrict. There is a general confusion that when people say love, they confuse it with just feeling. Feeling is too small for love. Love goes much deeper than the changes in feeling that we feel within love. Within love, we can feel sometimes even hate. Love is deeper than that. And it has to do with the care, with the importance the other carries for us. It has to do with paying attention, giving attention. It has to do with listening and wanting to really hear, just as you said, seeing and being seen. So just please don't confuse love with feeling. And that's quite a question. So what about sex? Permitted? How much? And why?
Yeah, it just shows. It just shows what a adventure we make out of this thing called sex. It's interesting that in the Buddhist world doesn't have a problem with natural sexuality for people in the community. Problem for monks. But the attitude of the Dharma is always about non-harming, non-abusing, non-hurting, reducing suffering. And with this attitude, nutrition, feeding, supporting what is free in a person. So the Buddhist world, and I think represented by something in our community here and in the Western world, there isn't an issue around the natural sexuality. There isn't an issue. It's not itself an issue, but there is an issue around, for example, the third of the, what is it, the fourth of the precepts. Fourth. And it's about the way sexuality either invades your mind or invades others people's space, or tends to use other people, or you tend to see other people because of your sexual needs, and you tend to, it becomes the filter on your awareness, that you see other people as from your needs. It becomes a filter in the consciousness. So sexuality, but in a free way, which doesn't use anybody and doesn't obsess the mind. Well, I know sometimes hormones drive us crazy. But still, anything can drive us crazy. Hormones can drive us crazy, especially, depends on your age. But it's up to us to say, okay, hormones driving me a bit crazy, but it's up to us not to let it overwhelm the mind and the consciousness and then become obsessive like any other need or desire. So it's not a problem, but we have to be, it's dynamite. We have to be careful, we have to know how to be easy, natural and free and ethical within the sexual world. And that's where the Dharma would always take it for householders. For monks it's something else, but that's their problem. And by the way, I can tell you, I'm not a monk, but I've met enough monks to know that it's far better to be a householder with a natural, non-abusive, healthy sexual life than some monks who are constantly busy with it in the mind, but not in the body. And so I think that's the direction. And I think it's really important also because one Dharma teacher said sexual desire can crack the mind, like you crack an egg. And it's a very powerful image, but because of its power, hormones, that to really capture the mind, it's of such a strong desire. It's not the same desire for tofu. It's so powerful that it can control us and control our consciousness, and there is where we really need to be careful. And people sometimes ask me, one partner or many. Does the Buddha say I should just have one partner?
We have a direct line with the Buddha.
No, the Buddha doesn't. But the Buddha would say, be really aware of what your sexual life is doing to your consciousness and to other people's consciousness, and allow it, and be very, very aware of the potential for suffering that's behind, lurking kind of somewhere behind that power. I must say also in the Theravada world, sexual energy isn't used spiritually in the traditional ancient Theravada teaching, but of course it is where in the tantric paths, which are more Tibetan, and then sexual energy is used as a kind of a shortcut. But it's also regarded as quite a risk. It's like jumping on a galloping horse. You can fall off, but it gets you there fast.
There are a few more questions about relationships.
Okay.
And they mainly share the concern about the relationship between freedom. What is freedom within love versus attachment? And does freedom mean I should let my partner just have other partners, or what to do with the sense of possessiveness, ownership, belonging?
I often feel that we're really looking for rules here, and no one can give them to us, and that's a problem. But imagine that we communicate with our partner on the deepest soul level, that we are so connected to our partner at the level of the deep heart, mind, consciousness level. I'm just giving a kind of a scenario. Trust, contact, respect, seeing the preciousness of the other, seeing the mystery of the other. Endless mystery that you can never get to the bottom, because this other person that you're so close to has no bottom. It's on. You can never discover the depth of another person close to you. The adventure of meeting and the intimacy with this huge being called your partner, that you can't get to the end because there's always more to discover. In that kind of relationship, all those questions don't have any sense anymore. If your partner needs, for example, more freedom, you will be the one to help that, because it will be so clear and so communicated and so trusted and so can shift the whole perception of relationship into such a deep flow between two people that it's obvious what needs to be done. And then there's no sense of possessiveness because it's so painful. It doesn't come in. You don't want to possess the other person because it's just painful. It's like trying to... You both know that if you manifest possessiveness, you are manifesting your fear, you're manifesting your loneliness, your insecurity, and that needs to be dealt with, not the possessiveness. And you can dialogue with it, you can feel it together. But to capture your partner is like trying to capture the wind. So I would always go there, to that place of this kind of huge or endless potential of the intimacy between two human beings, and it will solve all the problems. It's very difficult, however, to kind of give any formula without an example. If someone comes and says, what do I do in this situation, that situation, maybe one can talk about it. But in theory, all relationships, it's about the best I can say. But it's the existential aspect of relationship which is the main thing, and that sorts everything out. It's in the existential flow between you and another person that everything has to be sorted out. And then you become one. You become. There's no issues like that. And if there are issues that come up, such as my insecurity that makes me possessive, that becomes part of the space of the two people. It's not held as me. I have to hold this childhood pain of abandonment that makes me hang on to my partner, and every time my partner goes and talks to a guy, I'm sending a private detective. It's because it's shared. The insecurity that I feel is held in the relationship and held as understanding, as precious, as held together and worked through and understood, and not an enemy, not a problem. And then it doesn't need to manifest in these behaviors. So it's all in that flow, existential flow, that and by the way, one really difficult thing in relationships is the way that we need to label the other. And so the minute the other becomes a threat in some way, their freedom, then that's our projection onto the other. We project the other as being free and threatening, that they might go off with somebody else, or they might have other relationships, or I don't know what they're doing when they go out in the evening. It's our projections. They need to be held also in the space between two people. They need to be seen and held, and not brewing, like bubbling under the surface.
I feel that only lately I'm discovering the anger within me. I always think I'm not angry because I always had an explanation about the behavior of the other person and forcing myself to understand him. Now I know that I was also and I am also angry, and I just repress it, and it's beginning to come up, but I'm afraid to lose control.
Do you want to relate to it?
So easy.
Yeah. We really don't like anger. It's we don't like to be angry. We don't like others to be angry, and we're all angry. And what to do. But there is a lot of space between expression and suppression. Between, in Hebrew, haba'ah v'hadchaka. There is a lot of space, and we don't always know that space. And that's the space where anger can be our teacher. And I really don't think it's helpful to label anger as a devil, and every time we get angry, producing a chain of blame, of regret. Oh, I'm such a bad Buddhist. I've been on retreats and I'm still angry with my mother-in-law, my father, the Prime Minister, I should go on more retreats to stop the anger. But wait a minute. The anger is a flow of energy based on reactivity. Buttons are being pressed by the world, and we're responding spontaneously and naturally. Indeed, anger is a defense. Indeed, anger is based on fear. If we look at the anger, we'll see underneath it fear. We'll see protection. We'll see a sense that we're angry because we feel that we're in some way invaded. So it is these things. But it doesn't help to be angry at anger. It just doesn't help. Instead of that, we can see anger as natural, see it as the expression of reactivity and defense, and see anger as a flow of energy and life that's coming in us when we're faced with challenge. Just see it fully aware of anger. See its pain, see that it does damage sometimes, but allowing it to be fully seen, that slowly, that space is between suppression and expression, and that space slowly makes anger less controlling on us. Because whatever we see, it doesn't control us. What we don't see controls us. What we see doesn't control us anymore. So it takes time. And maybe the anger will be with us all our life. But certainly the seeing of it will make it less and less and less and less until it's just a kind of a little blip, like a blip on the screen. We get someone says something and there's a little blip of energy, maybe here in the solar plexus. Here, you might feel tiny little memory of anger. Okay, it's still anger, but it's been, like I said, mitkavetz, the icon in the computer. All that's left is a shortcut. So, but that's through being, in a way, familiar and close to and a partner with our anger and not an enemy of it. Because the more, if it's an enemy, it will keep blowing itself up. We're dancing around it all the time. We just need to make it less to be seen. So it's like if we see this angry monster, if we see him clearly, we can see actually he just wants us to love him. He just wants our love. That's all. He just wants to be seen, like everybody and everything. And this big monster anger, we just needs to be seen and loved. In other words, connected with. And we can do that by just looking at it in the body and looking at it in our mind and looking at it, it is painful, and holding it as something, as life energy, and not a problem. And that way, slowly it goes. Now and then, we do need to be perhaps a little bit careful, and we're in difficult situations, and maybe to take 3 breaths before we kill somebody. Maybe we'll need to at times. I'm not saying that it's all, a Vipassana retreat story. At times, maybe we need to take 3 breaths in order to calm down. It's all right, it's fine, it's wise to do that. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't do that. Of course, sometimes we will need to do that. Count to 10 before we respond to somebody unwisely, not to hurt people, etc. That's for sure. But what I'm talking about is something in our life to take out the toxicity from anger.
because this specific question was also addressed to me specifically, I will allow myself to answer in a personal relationship and not in a Buddhist context necessarily. I just want to say that sometimes we really need our anger. And if it weren't for my anger, maybe in many ways I'll still be deeply imprisoned within convention, within all sorts of subduing of the living in every sense of the way. And I think when we say anger, maybe it's a big family and we need to inquire what we are talking about. Because anger is not one phenomena. It's not one feeling. And the moral outrage that we may feel against injustice or situations of injustice, we need the energy. We need to see what is wrong and to learn and how to hold those energies and not to lose our power by giving in the collapse into the feeling of, how shall I say, weakening outburst of anger. So sometimes anger is taking a stand, and maybe we need to broaden our inquiry and language and looking into this important energy.
Although I would argue with you here, and in the end, I think we can let the anger go. I don't think it's such a reliable source of energy, as you say. I think it's unreliable and exhausting, and it can be destructive. Even our anger against injustice, I think that compassion, in the end, is much more sustainable as a power that powers us against injustice. I think it's just more sustainable. It just doesn't destroy us in the process. I mean, it's interesting that the prophets in the Bible, Nevi'im, had this righteous anger against injustice. But someone like Moshe was at another level. He rescued the whole of the Jewish people with wisdom and compassion. And so I think that it's not that I agree with you, but I think the Bodhisattva is not the Nevi'im, is a Navi. The Bodhisattva has gone to a place where there's such, and the Bodhisattva in us, I'm not talking about the Bodhisattva in Chinese Buddhism, I'm talking about you and me. There is a little Bodhisattva in all of us. That Bodhisattva, because of connection with others, the action follows in a natural, spontaneous way because of connection, and we know what to do. And it doesn't always need anger. But I agree, sometimes the anger, at least to a certain extent, we need it, but then I think we can let it go.
There are many questions now about the relationship of Buddhism to different fields of life, of our life and living, like the social field, the economic world.
I think we'll leave it until tomorrow, actually. It's the sort of questions of Dharma, of Buddhist teaching daily life. I think we'll leave it until tomorrow.
Is the incredible sense of well-being, contentment, clarity, peace, and quiet mind that I experience both directly in daily life and in meditation, if it is not bliss, then can you please tell me what it is?
It is bliss. Definitely bliss.
I've got no questions left.
They are.
Oh.
You want?
No, I'm just...
Stephen, if it is appropriate, can you please tell me what you, and not you, yourself and not self, went through in preparation and giving this retreat? What helped you free yourself from the fear of camera? What is supporting you to relate with compassion to so many egos you felt or experienced in the people you met during the retreat?
Yeah, it's a good personal question. I must say the idea for filming these talks never happened to me before in 20 years of teaching. That my talks have been so well recorded and filmed. It really happened in England when I went to visit Christopher, and Sahar was there, and Sahar and Christopher were being busy putting Christopher's film talks on YouTube and sorting them out. And it seemed such a kind of joyful, interesting way of having talks out there, and for Christopher to be out there in the world. Although I must admit, you know, with the millions and millions and millions of YouTube films, and I don't know whether it's really how effective it will be really in the world of the huge quantity of information that exists out there. But it just seemed really exciting. So I got caught in that creative energy, and I said to Sahar, come on, let's do it in Israel. And Sahar was so welcoming and ready to do this. And then we worked on getting camera, and we borrowed a camera for this. So I did prepare my talks. I usually do prepare talks, but not much, kind of just making some notes and having a card that gives kind of keys. In this case, because it was being filmed, the week before the retreat, I spent, I suppose, 4 days, each day 3 hours. That was to prepare the talks and give some sense of... I'm not one of these people which I really admire, like Ajahn Amaro that was here, and Christopher, who can just sort of be talking, having cups of tea and so on, and then they walk into the room and they give a talk for 1 hour, spontaneously. And the minute before, they prepare 1 minute. And my brain doesn't work like that. So I do need to have a sense that I know where I'm going next, because otherwise I just feel I won't know where I'm going at all. So I did prepare, and I do prepare talks, and this one especially, about 4 days, each day 3 hours or so. And the camera, and you, and all these egos, I just love all these egos. I'm falling in love. I don't have a problem. It's falling in love. It's just making love. That's what it is. So and you know, but behind every ego is like the wave on the ocean. So I'm talking to the wave and I'm talking to the ocean. And each of you and me and Reni here, we are waves and we are ocean. And sometimes we talk more to the wave. When the wave says, I'm a wave, help, we talk to the wave. And when the wave says, I'm part of the ocean. So we talk to the ocean. And about the story, whether I'm kind of camera shy, I actually gave that story during the retreat, I think, about how I used Vipassana to overcome fear of, which was very, very strong for me, fear of crowds, of talking in front of people. It used to be really, really strong, like I said, I think in one of my talks, that when I was giving lectures at university, I wanted to die. I couldn't bear it. It was a terrible experience for me. And it took a year or 2 years, but it went through a basic, classic, basic Vipassana practice of just reducing all that fear into a stomach phenomena of contraction in the tummy. And that was it. And just being with it, sympathetically interested, and as phenomena, not as me. Taking the identification, the self, out of the fear. And then the fear became just a phenomenon, nothing, something arising and going. Unimportant, uninteresting. The identification is what makes things interesting. They become then in front of us and they can stay with us all our life. So I don't have any more of that. And the medicine was very, very basic Vipassana practice. Anything else personal in that question that I didn't answer? No, that was it.
In the Buddhism, is there God?
I forgot that question was there. It's quite a big question, of course. And I have an article which is in my website in Hebrew and in English. And so you're welcome to read it. And the article is entitled, Does God exist, or is existence God? And interesting that the Buddhist world did arise in India. And India is a kind of grand party of gods. They are everywhere. It was wonderful when I was in India the first time to watch, for example, carpenter. I mean, all gods have their festival days. So the carpenters, they have a carpenter god. And there's a carpenter day. But every morning the carpenter would get up in the morning, put his tools on a cloth and make some mantras and light incense and worship the god of the carpenters and worship the tools. So the Buddha grew up in that environment where, in a way, gods were like the Greek world, more like we would say thoughts. We're in a psychology world. Our gods are dressed up in the language of psychology and science, and we have language like thought, or a feeling, or a narrative. I use the word a lot. And the Indians would call them gods, and so would the Greeks. So the Buddha grew up in that environment, and so there are plenty of gods in the Buddhist early tradition, and God realms where they live, and they tend to be in bliss, but rather unenlightened. And that's the God world. having a great time, but missing out on awakening. And mainly the reason they miss out on awakening is they don't suffer. And it's one of the insights of the Dharma that a human being has a much better chance of awakening because the human being has one leg in dukkha and one leg in sukha. It's standing between suffering and joy. And therefore this challenge creates awakening, the possibility of awakening. And the gods only have sukha. They have one leg only, both legs in sukha. However, if you ask whether Buddhism has a overriding God figure that is the source of all, the answer clearly is no. There isn't such a thing, and in a way, we are used to God language, but if we look at it really carefully, for example, the first words of the Bible, Bereshit bara Elohim, say God, actually Elohim plural, gods, made the world, but in the Kabbalah, it's Reshit bara Elohim. In other words, gods were made by Reshit, the beginning. So no God as a source of all, even in the Jewish mystical tradition, and the Buddhism is a mystical tradition, or mystical, but it's, shall we say, spiritual. And so it doesn't acknowledge any being that is the source of everything. Instead it would say it's karma is making us as we are, and that's a mystery, we can't know the origin of it, and it's pointless with our little minds to look for a creator. The creation is happening right now. We are being made right now by karma. In this minute is making us as we are. Is making every thought, every moment is being created now. No need to postulate a God behind it all. It's just not necessary and confusing, according to the Buddhist world. You want to end here? We can maybe have a last question and that's it. You want one last question?
Can you help me with the density and pressure I feel in my head during meditation?
Do you want to answer? Yeah. Well, we both answer it. Walking meditation. That should sort it out. We live in our heads actually too much. We tend to live here. Headache is the most common symptom in the world, in the Western world actually. Headache is the most common symptom because all the blood goes here, all the interest goes here, we believe we're here, we believe we sit here, we look at the world from here, we are in the left brain which is up here trying to work out everything all the time. Left brain. And when we meditate, sometimes we actually meditate and we get very busy. And meditation becomes really busy and turning things in the mind. And then sometimes emotions arise like anxiety or fear, and they also go up there. And we start to worry, and worry is also here. So all that energy, prana, goes up. And somehow, and even the instructions that we've been giving in this retreat have been about bringing energy into more balance in the body. Meditation on the tummy will help, because the tummy is the center of our body-mind. Bringing energy down into this part of the body, bringing energy down into the feet while walking, bringing balance into the emotions, so the emotions are in the body and not rising all the time up here. And a sense that the whole body is knowing. Not just the knowing happening here, but knowing happening everywhere. And that takes the pressure off. And so I think it's helpful to take, if we feel so much pressure up here in the head, bring it down. We can bring it down actively. We can feel our belly. We can feel our body. We can feel the weight of our body on the ground. It makes a balance. There's quite a nice Tibetan practice. And any of you that have headaches, migraine, or such such things, can try it. It's actually breathing into the belly and holding the breath in the belly for a moment and then let it go. And as you breathe, you imagine all the sensations, the sensations of life that you feel in the head and in the upper body. You draw it down and hold it here in the belly and then let go. When you breathe out, you let go. And you keep drawing it down into the belly and drawing down sensations into the belly. And it really can heal a headache, and especially tendencies for headaches. So it's quite helpful to kind of locate ourselves in the belly here. And that's an antidote for the tendency for everything to rise up to the head.
So we are coming to the end, and I just want to say something because I gave my voice to reading your questions, which was so helpful and a trigger to all this. If I've done injustice to the question because I read part or didn't read it exactly in the intent and in the fullness with which you wrote it, please understand and let go. And at the end, I want to share a poem that we received for the Sangha and us for this evening. It's named Awakening. In front of me, there is a tree, and birds circling around it. There is a tree with birds circling around it. There are fragments of a tree, and me, fragments of me, and fragments of birds circling around us. There is love and emptiness all around.
So let's just take 5-10 minutes of quiet together.